I thank the chairwoman again for calling this hearing and for including H.R. 6899 in the markup. Thank the ranking member for making this a priority as well. This has been an issue I've talked about extensively in this committee and around the country since September of 2020. At a time when our friends in Ukraine are looking to us for support in confronting Russia's assault, it's heartening to see our committee rallying around bipartisan legislation to hold the Putin regime in check. This bill would prohibit the Treasury Secretary from exchanging dollars for IMF special drawing rights held by Russia or Belarus. These SDRs total over $25 billion and represent unconditional liquidity for the Putin and Lukashenko dictatorships, which are now working hand in hand to systematically dismantle and destroy democratic Ukraine. In addition, my bill would require the Treasury Department to push relevant member countries at the IMF to also deny these transactions. Let's be blunt. We should be particularly concerned about Russia's ability to exchange its SDRs for RMB, especially as Moscow is increasingly forced to turn to China for trade and liquidity in response to our sanctions and sanctions from allied partners around the world. Since China has not mirrored these sanctions, Russia's SDRs and RMB reserves remain available to Tsar Putin. This lifeline will become all the more valuable to Moscow if the United States and our allies come up with even broader strategic sanctions to deprive Russia of even other ways to derive hard currency, as particularly it earns through energy exports. In other words, the more successful we are in closing off Russia's access to its reserve assets and its export earnings, the more vital its SDRs become. We must therefore work with the IMF to ensure that the SDR path is also blocked as long as Russian hostilities against Ukraine continue. For example, let's take a look at a chart that I'm passing out that we can't put on the screen because we're having a hybrid hearing, and this will be inserted in the record. But it notes that while the central bank cannot get access to hard currency reserves, it's got a large stake of gold and it's got SDRs. And while gold is not easy to do anything with but pledge for future collateral, the SDRs are a tradable, fungible asset that could be used by non-sanctioned participating countries like the communist Chinese to aid Russia. My point is that SDRs are one of the few remaining sources of financing that's left for Moscow, and this bill will ensure they cannot access it. And let's not forget, if Russia is ever forced to go to the IMF as a lender of last resort, as it has 4 times in history, then we must not allow it to obtain emergency liquidity if it's still waging war in Ukraine. That's why my bill also requires the Treasury to ensure that the IMF lending programs cannot come to Putin's rescue. To be clear, Madam Chair, these provisions are a means to achieve an objective, and that objective is changing the state of play in Ukraine. My bill offers Russia and Belarus an off-ramp if they put an end to their attacks and their destabilizing activities. It also includes, like all of our intentional financial institution bills, waiver authority to provide our executive branch with appropriate leverage and flexibility in negotiations. But Moscow has the obligation to take the first step, and those steps must lead away from Kyiv back across the sovereign borders of Ukraine. I thank the chairwoman for her support of this bill, and I look forward to the passage of our bipartisan measures today to hold Russia accountable. But I have to end with one point of critique, because I hope it will inform future deliberations at the IMF. Of the $24 billion in SDRs that Russia possesses, more than $17 billion, Madam Chair, $17 billion were as a result of a gift that Putin got last year through the Biden administration's approval of a general allocation of special drawing rights. I oppose that. I spoke out significantly about it. I have colleagues in this House that have spoken out against it. And from the very beginning last year, I opposed the $650 billion allocation precisely because it runs counter to Treasury's ongoing sanctions against Russia. There's a better way, and I'd like to insert in the record H.R. 1568 the SDR Oversight Act and related supporting articles from the Wall Street Journal and The Hill.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This would put Congress in charge of how best to oversee the issuance of special drawing rights and keep special drawing rights out of the hands of rogue nations like Russia. By preventing this kind of activity, Congress will be in charge, and Congress will guide the IMF on something that keeps in mind Treasury's objectives of shutting off finance to rogue actors around the world. I thank the chairwoman, and I yield back the balance of my time.